Can affordable entry-level subwoofers sound good and look good? Well, I like cheap subs and I cannot lie, so let's find out. In this video, I'm going to show you my entire process, starting with modeling the subwoofer using some software on my computer, so stay tuned. The first thing I notice is that these subs are going to struggle to get down into the lower frequencies. That means we have an important decision. Can we tune higher and get more SPL, or do we want to tune lower and get a wider frequency band, but with, of course, less SPL? These drivers are also very forgiving. If you get the tuning frequency off a bit, you're not going to get a big difference in the sound. So these really are great entry-level drivers for somebody that's new to box building, and they will work in a wide variety of prefabricated enclosures. I'm not going to lock in my final decision on that tuning frequency until after I've sketched out some plans. You can do this with pencil and paper. I like to use the computer because I can't draw. For this design, I want to use plenty of room on the baffle so that I can experiment with some design elements. More on that in a bit. In order to make this easy to build, I'm going to choose box dimensions and a tuning frequency so that all I'll need is this one piece right here for my port. I've got several videos on my channel that show you how to use both WinISD and SketchUp, and several showing how I break down my sheet goods. So I broke down the MDF off camera, and I'll put a link to all of those videos down in the description of this video. I typically double up on the baffle, but this is a low power application, so it's really not needed. Instead, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to add a few curves to the enclosure. Start with the inner baffle and mark out the locations for the driver cutouts. I'm going to offset these just to be different. Normally, I use a circle jig on a handheld router to make these cutouts, but this time I'm going to rough cut the baffle and use these circle templates. It's a bit slower and there's a lot more steps involved, but I like this better because I have better dust collection on the router table. Now for the outer baffle. For this, I'm going to add some large curves on opposite corners. I marked that out and rough cut it on the jigsaw. So now I'm going to combine two of these straight pieces and a circle piece to trim it out on the router. Now's a good time for a test fit before I trim out the port. I think I'll end up flipping this so that the subs are along the curved corners. Hey, back to the router table. Here I've stuck the baffle and outer trim piece together with double-sided tape, and I'm trimming out the port using some MDF scraps. Next, you're going to want to put a round over on the trim piece. Here's a tip. Take a second to mark the inside and the outside of these pieces so you don't put the round over on the wrong side. And before you cut that round over, grab some scrap and make sure you have the bit at the right height. For the port, I want to leave a ridge on the outer edge of the port. Now I'm going to throw in a rabbet bit and put a rabbet on the underside of that trim piece. This rabbet bit is a very important tool. All these rabbets are going to be used later to make it easier to wrap the box. And yes, I got that idea from Car Audio Fabrication. It's not an original idea. It works. That's why I use it. But you don't need a top-of-the-line, super expensive rabbet bit like this to get started. You can use something like this. I used this bit and that router table right there for several years before I was able to upgrade. I'll make sure to put a link to these rabbet bits down in the video description. Keeping with the theme of doing things a little different, I'm going to do something slightly different for the brace. When I first started building subwoofer boxes, I made my braces 3/4 of an inch thick. For this one, the brace is going to be 1.5 inches thick. Why? Because it's smart to put a roundover on the inside edges of the brace, and that roundover is going to take out some material. And I found that with 3/4 inch and 1 inch pieces, that roundover takes out so much material that the brace isn't as strong as it should be. Oh, and here's a time-saving tip. Do all of your flush cutting while you have the flush trim bit in the router, and all of your rabbets while you have the rabbet bit in the router, and all of your roundovers when you have the roundover bit in the router. I didn't do that, so I probably wasted 30 minutes of my life swapping out router bits on this build. I made that mistake because I wasn't thinking ahead when I was making my cuts. And that's a side effect of being a DIYer with a full-time job. I work on these projects when I can carve out the time, 30 minutes here, an hour there. And so I tend to focus more on just getting something done instead of trying to be hyper efficient. And of course, I could not make these videos without the support of my patrons. Patrons get access to plans and behind the scenes content. Plus, $10 patrons get their name right down here at the bottom of the screen. And $25 patrons like Bo, David T, Bam Bam, Dylan, Fargo, JD America, and Baba, they all get a shout out in the video. Hit the link in the description to join us on Patreon. All right, this is my favorite part of any build. This is the part where you start putting all these pieces together and it starts to actually look like a subwoofer enclosure. Tell me down in the comments, what's your favorite part of a speaker build? My method's pretty straightforward. I like to use glue and brad nails. I like to clamp things into position. The clamps basically serve as extra hands. Now right here, I want to point out that I almost made a huge mistake. I cut out a hole for the terminal cup off camera and I didn't measure the location. I just kind of eyeballed it. If it would have been just a little bit to the left, it would have interfered with the brace. So I kind of got lucky, and I'm not going to make that mistake again, and hopefully you won't either. Before installing the port, I'm going to tack in this 45. Now to get the port in the exact perfect position, I grabbed some scrap plywood and I made this thing right here. This is my patent pending, high-tech, precision machine port spacer tool. After using it to place the port in the correct location, it can be used to make sure that the port does not exhibit vertical or horizontal deflection before it is glued and tacked into position. And from there, it's just a matter of slathering on some glue and attaching the two baffles. I often find that the top is a bit of a tight fit, so I break out one of my favorite tools, the motivator. At this point, the enclosure itself is finished. You could wire it up, drop in the subs, and enjoy the music. But I'm trying to up my game. Now the goal for the build is to make these cheap subwoofers look and sound great. This box is going to give us a solid foundation to do just that. Now I need to apply the carpet and the vinyl, plus I need to do some sound test and SPL measurements. Click right here to see that video. I'm Justin, this is the DIY Audio Guy YouTube channel, and I will see you on the next adventure.